start with this. Former two-division champion Danny Garcia believes a fight with Terrence Crawford is possible.
But is it plausible?
It's a difference between possible and plausible.
Anything is possible, but plausible means likely.
For several years, the two have had overlapping stints in the same division, yet for whatever reason, the pair have failed to get it on. With both fighters in their mid-30s and nearing the end of their careers, Garcia still believes that there's a slither of a chance that they swap fists. I think it's possible, Garcia said to Fight Hub TV. I think it's possible. We do have history.
Ship might have sailed.
Though not for lack of trying, I think it was in circa 2018-2019, the people at Top Rank made Danny Garcia an offer to come over to their side of things, $3 million guarantee with a pay-per-view upside.
To fight Crawford.
He instead decided to stay on his own side of things and took on a journeyman in Ivan Redkach and Adrian Granados instead. Does that sound familiar?
Frank Martin.
It is true that Terrence Crawford and Danny Garcia have history. They were 1-1 with each other in the amateurs and in the pros. Before Terrence made his ascent to 147, him and Danny used to regularly go at it on social media.
They never fought.
Let's call a spade a spade. It's because Danny didn't want to. I reiterate, Top Rank tried to make the fight, and it's not like there was a counter offer, a rebuttal from the PBC for them to do it, for them to pay for the fight. They preferred to keep Danny safe and sound opposite the ring, no hopers and journeymen.
Let's take a little stroll down memory lane.
We'll trip back to December of 2019.
Listen to them. Make it easier for them.
Okay.
For that team over there.
Okay.
Why they don't bring Machenko to 147? And then he could have 4 world titles like Canelo.
When asked about a Terrence Crawford fight for his son, what Angel Garcia recommended was that they bring up Vasyl Lomachenko from 130 or 135, wherever he was at the time, up to welterweight. You're volunteering a lightweight to stand in for your son.
It's pathetic.
4 division champions, that makes them happy.
Right.
You get it?
No, I get what you're saying.
Like, what is the problem here?
Right.
Like, why are you worrying about PBC fighters?
Because this is boxing, and the paying customers pay to see the best fighters versus the best fighters. At the time, Danny Garcia was considered one of the best fighters, at least one of the best welterweights, and you sound upset about it.
Why should Terrence Crawford fighting your son make you upset?
Well, he's saying, well,
I understand they saying 47 will step it up, but he's a WBO champion.
Right.
You got 100 top WBO ranked.
Yeah, and your son was one of them.
Right.
100 people you can pick out of. Fight your #1 contender.
I think somebody should have told Angel.
This video, by way of AB Boxing News, is from December of 2019. And do you want to know who the #1 contender by way of the WBO was in December of 2019?
Who was it?
Danny Garcia!
In December of 2019, it was literally Danny Garcia ranked at #1 by way of the WBO. They didn't pursue him for no reason.
How pathetic is it that Angel is offering up Vasyl Lomachenko, a lightweight at the time, or anybody else, any other than his son, from the WBO's ranked standings for a fight with Terrence? Shouldn't he want to fight with Terrence?
Right. I mean, they're kind of... Go ahead.
What you got to understand, brother, is that everybody has their own lane.
Right.
PBC got his own lane. Barbaric. Everybody has. Why they worrying about PBC 47?
Maybe they have no one for Crawford to fight.
Yeah, but they got plenty of people to fight. You got WBO. I just told you that.
Right.
Yeah, and Danny Garcia was ranked at #1 by way of the WBO. So what was the problem?
Bunch of fucking chicken shits. That's the problem.
Well, maybe...
Your main challenger.
Right. I mean, it seems like they want somebody from the PBC to jump to their network and fight.
But the point is this. There's no money to be made.
Hear this guy? They offered his son $3 million and a pay-per-view upside to fight Terrence Crawford, but he was more content fighting Adrian Granados and Ivan Redkach, and nobody gave him $3 million to fight either of those guys while we're on the subject of money.
If it was really about money, then you would have fought Terrence, because you would have got more money to fight Terrence than you made fighting them.
This wasn't about money. This was about survival.
Right.
Unless you're giving us $10 million.
Well,
Is that what you got paid to fight Ivan Redkach? Is that what you got paid to fight Adrian Granados? $10 million. Hell, is that what you got paid to fight Errol Spence?
No.
So then why do you need $10 million to fight Terrence Crawford?
No, Danny's a ticket seller. There's no secret
but
about
the point
that.
is not that. The point is, at the same time, how much they willing to pay? What, $3 million?
Danny accepted less than that to fight Errol Spence Jr. in late 2020. He was only guaranteed something like $1 million.
$2 million less than he was offered to fight Crawford.
Even if he made a little extra on the back end, or the upside of the pay-per-view, if there even was one, even if he did,
Could have made a little extra on the upside of a Crawford pay-per-view.
you know, Danny's big seller, big ticket seller, all that cool stuff. He would have made a little extra on the back end with an even bigger guarantee. 3 times bigger.
It's not about the belt at the same time. I'm not trying to talk politics. I'm not trying to bash no sanction.
Right.
But this shit ain't free, brother.
As you can see, Angel Garcia, Danny Garcia's father, Team Garcia as a whole, they were not receptive to a Terrence Crawford fight.
That's why it didn't happen then.
Mr. Johnny Come Lately thinks it's still a possibility now, saying, I think it's more on my end. I've got to go out there and look good in my next fight. I've definitely got a name, but when I'm fighting somebody, I want to win. I'm not just coming for a check.
Oh?
It's not about the belt at the same time.
So I want to make sure I'm ready for whatever. When I win this next fight, then I'll be ready for whoever, referring to the upcoming Erislandy Lara fight for what is the WBA middleweight title.
Let's make a long story short here, fellas. The PBC and many of their fighters negotiate from a position of weakness, a position of fear.
What you saw many years ago from Team DSG and what you're currently seeing between Frank Martin and Shakur Stevenson, they negotiate from a position of weakness and a position of fear because they know if they are exposed to the rest of the boxing community, they can't hack it.
These guys only look good when they're fighting each other. You let them off the leash.
Some of a little dog's gonna tear them apart. Some other dog from some other neighborhood. They knew it then when it came to Danny and Terrence the same way they know it now when it comes to Frank Martin and Shakur.
Mr. Johnny Come Lately, Danny Garcia, thinks it's still possible that he fights Terrence.
Terrence has other people on his mind. He's got other fighters. The rematch with Errol Spence Jr., then perhaps the winner of Canelo versus Charlo. Maybe, if Danny wins that WBA title at middleweight, maybe that'll be an incentive for Terrence to give him time of day. But the fisherman, as it were, the fisherman, Terrence Crawford, does seem to have bigger fish to fry. Speaking of big fish, Jermell Charlo warns Terrence Crawford not to play games and take forever with future negotiations like Bud did with Errol Spence Jr.
That wasn't Terrence dragging his feet. Terrence is not the reason the fight took so long to make.
Try as they might to shift the blame over to him, I do everything I can for the fans to make sure that the fight against Crawford happens, Charlo told BoxingScene.com and other reporters. If Crawford comes up to my weight division or comes to wherever I'm at and meets me halfway and has good negotiations, because I don't have time to be playing them games that he did with Errol Spence Jr. and taking forever. I ain't here for that. I want to fight and keep fighting. Get in and present more fights for you guys. I'm holding it down for the Charlos. I'm going to keep it going.
Wasn't Terrence Crawford playing games? He just wasn't going to let you guys give him the runaround.
Let's be honest here. If what Jermell is referring to is the failed set of negotiations last year that led to the successful negotiations this year, it never had to take that long to begin with. It was Errol Spence Jr. and his team who insisted they clean up their side of the street first. That took approximately 4 to 5 years.
Whose fault was that?
I'm undisputed. I'm fighting another undisputed champion in Alvarez. I'm happy about that. My life is good. I'm prevailing, said Charlo. I'm finally getting the fight that I deserve and a fight that will be a pinnacle where people can't stop talking about me.
And he's right. This is the biggest fight of his career.
If he were to win, it might lead to his second fight with Canelo for more money, a lot more money than Jermell normally makes.
He's right about that. It's a big fight.
I mean, one thing's for sure. Jermell Charlo's about to fight in the biggest fight of his career, and he can't afford to have anybody else on his mind other than Canelo Alvarez. For all this talk of Crawford versus Charlo, we're not on the eve of Crawford versus Charlo.
Nope.
Later on this month, what we're on the eve of is Charlo versus Canelo.
That's what Jermell's got to get ready for.
Finding it particularly vexing, the constant questions about a Terrence Crawford fight saying, don't write a check that your ass can't cash.
Well, Terrence did say he wants the winner, not the loser, of Charlo versus Canelo. So if these two are to come to a head, and if they are to meet, Jermell Charlo's got to seal the deal with Canelo, and that is easier said than done.
He's got an uphill battle in front of him. It's a tall ask to move up in weight from 154 straight up to 168, to not just fight anybody, not just any super middleweight, but one of the best super middleweights, the best super middleweight.
That division's undisputed champion.
One of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport, in the world, Canelo Alvarez, coming off over a year of inactivity and reported hand surgery.
Yeah, it's a tall ask.
It's a tough assignment, and Jermell Charlo himself talked about that, explaining that it's tough to transform his body into that of a super middleweight.
You know, he is a taller, longer fighter than Canelo Alvarez. He has those advantages, that he has a bigger frame than Canelo, but he's not actually acclimated to this weight.
You know, truthfully, I didn't think this fight would ever happen, but it presented itself, and I took it. It's happening now. It's never too late, Charlo told BoxingScene.com in an interview. Canelo and my styles are completely different. He's much shorter than me, but he's a little bit thicker. It makes for a great fight.
To the surprise of some, I've often heard fighters say that fighting fighters that are shorter than they are, shorter fighters, it's actually more difficult than fighting people their own size.
Spoken to one or two fighters, a few fighters that have told me they'd prefer to fight someone that's eye level to them than a shorter, stumpier fighter with a lower center of gravity, because it makes for a smaller target.
And I remember when Tyson Fury was on the Joe Rogan podcast a few years ago, he detailed how smaller fighters, they give him fits. They give him problems.
The relevance of that to this conversation, well, Canelo Alvarez is a shorter, stumpier fighter than Jermell Charlo, who may render him off balance.
Whether you're talking about Canelo's ability to catch and shoot, or his ability to move his head, keep it off the line, fight on a swivel,
while he's closing in, it forces the other fighter to either open up,
throw some punches
that Canelo Alvarez counters, or it forces them to give up ground, give up real estate, which makes for bad optics in the eyes of the judges, because then it looks like you're getting bullied, like you're getting pushed around.
Even though Jermell Charlo has a height advantage and a reach advantage, there are virtues to Canelo Alvarez's smaller stature.
Man, I really don't know that just yet. If I am a 168-pound fighter, moving fighter, 168, considerably still kind of like not my weight division. It's not as easy to make 168. I have to gain weight, and gaining weight when you're working really hard is really tough. I could easily walk around at 168. I'm definitely not the naturally bigger fighter. 168 is not my weight division.
Wait a minute, I literally saw him say the opposite 2 weeks ago.
It's tough transforming the body. It's a task. It has to happen. Sometimes to make the best fights in boxing, you have to take chances and risks. That's just the nature of this game. We want to continue to put on for the sport, because fights like this make the sport of boxing very noticeable and top-notch. We have to continue doing these things.
Jermell is taller than Canelo and longer than Canelo, and he probably walks around same walk-around weight as Canelo, but he doesn't have as much muscle mass.
Actual muscle tissue, not to be confused with fats, which, you know, you burn in camp.
That's the transformation he's more or less talking about. What needs to change?
He's feeling it. He's feeling the pressure. I even saw a few sound bites, a few quotes from Jermell where he's admitting that he is nervous ahead of his thing, and he should be.
What he does with that nervous energy is what makes all the difference. Does he use it to sharpen himself?
How does he react under pressure? More pressure than he's ever faced. Does he use it to sharpen his skills, or does he shrink?
He's gonna make a lot of fucking money either way.
Charlo continued, I think I can knock out Canelo Alvarez. I've got the power to knock him out.
Does he?
It took Jermell 2 fights, 2 whole fights, to score 1 knockout of Tony Harrison. It took him 2 fights to score 1 knockout of Brian Castano. And that was at 154.
He's moving up 14 pounds to 168.
I think I can knock him out, yeah. Charlo replied to a question posed by Showtime's Brian Custa during a recent episode of his Last Stand podcast. I think I've got the power to knock him out.
I don't.
I'm sorry. But on one end, you got Jermell saying that moving up is tough, transforming his body to that of a super middleweight. On one hand, you've got him saying that, and on the other, you've got him saying this, that he can stop a guy who's fully acclimated to this weight, fought bigger men than Jermell, and who's never been stopped or dropped.
I don't begrudge Jermell his ambition. He's supposed to think that way.
Just don't believe him either. Jermell continued, I throw a lot of blinding shots, and I throw a lot of different shots that are unique, Charlo said. It's weird and a very, very different from a lot of people, and they're very strong, and I've been throwing those shots for years and practicing those specific shots for years, and I think he'll get touched by one of them.
I'm not convinced.
Canelo Alvarez has shared the ring with the likes of Gennady Golovkin, one of the harder punchers the sport has seen in recent memory. He fought that guy 3 times, 3 fights, 12 rounds each.
That makes 36. 36 rounds with one of the hardest punchers the sport has seen in recent years, and he was never stopped, never dropped.
Gennady Golovkin, Callum Smith, Dmitry Bivol, these are all naturally bigger men than Canelo, bigger men than Jermell.
They couldn't stop him.
Jermell is saying that he believes that he can, while simultaneously saying, I won't really know until I get in there with Canelo with the 10-ounce gloves. Conflicting statements, somewhat contradictory. Truthfully, I won't really know until I actually get in there with the 10-ounce gloves, Charlo told Custer for an episode of Custer's The Last Stand podcast. Like, I won't know because of the fact that the power in the punches could be a little different with a 10-ounce glove. But I've been in the ring with a lot of guys that's way bigger than Canelo, way bigger than me. And that's because of the fact that, I was knocking guys out in sparring.
Hey, Canelo could say the same thing. He's been in there with bigger guys than himself.
Unless I'm mistaken, some time ago there was some sparring footage available between him and Frankie Sanchez. Frankie Sanchez, who campaigns all the way up there at heavyweight.
Sparring stories aside, the harder puncher under the hot lights, where it counts the most, has proven to be Canelo Alvarez, who was able to stop Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant, who had never been stopped,
Was unbeaten at the time.
David Benavidez couldn't stop that guy, but Canelo did.
So, in order to spar with a 154-pounder, a lot of them would have to gain a lot of weight, I could feel it, and I could feel like when someone was a little too heavy. But that time should rewind itself now and bring itself back, because this is what I'm going to be facing.
And I don't begrudge Jermell Charlo his ambition.
Nobody ever did anything that was hard to do, difficult to do, by telling themselves they couldn't do it. If no one else believes it, he has to believe it. But I don't. I'm not convinced, especially when his plan of action is to fight on the balls of his feet, moving laterally, keeping Canelo on the outside. If you do that, you're not sitting on your shots, and you're not
generating the same power fighting on the balls of your feet.
So, the idea that Jermell will be the first to stop Canelo Alvarez, it does seem a bit far-fetched to me.